You know, we at Politics and Prose have been working with the folks here at Lisner for a number of years now, putting on large author events. And we're very grateful to be able to have access to such a spacious and convenient facility here in Washington. And a huge, huge auditorium was certainly needed this evening for such a bigly event. I mean, is this the greatest event ever or what? It's fantastic. You know, it is hard these days not to mimic Trump. Late night hosts have been fixated on the president for months, and many stand-up comics have incorporated takes on him into their acts. But Alec Baldwin's channeling of Trump on Saturday Night Live has become a standard against which other parodies are and will continue to be judged. His wildly popular impersonation has already netted him another Emmy and is likely to go down as a crowning achievement of a long acting career that dates back nearly 4 decades and has included more than 60 films, more than 20 TV shows, and 8 stage roles. Over the years, Alex played a wide range of parts and garnered nominations for an Oscar and a number of other awards, but he really hit his stride as network executive Jack Donaghy on the NBC sitcom 30 Rock, where he won 2 Emmys, 3 Golden Globes, and 7 Screen Actor Guild Awards during the show's run from 2006 to 2013. Alec also has authored or co-authored 2 previous books, and now he's joined forces with Kurt Andersen to produce You Can't Spell America Without Me, a fake memoir in which Trump looks back on his first year as president. Kurt himself first mocked Trump back in the 1980s when, as a founding editor of the satirical magazine Spy, he started calling Trump the short-fingered vulgarian. Over the years, Kurt has reported for a number of magazines, including Time, Vanity Fair, and The New Yorker, and served as editor-in-chief of New York. He's also host and co-creator of Studio 36, a weekly radio program about arts and culture produced by Public Radio International and WNYC, and he's authored several novels, humor books, and works of nonfiction, including earlier this year, Fantasyland, How America Went Haywire, a 500-year history. The Trump book does sound a lot like Trump. So much so, in fact, that readers are likely to have a difficult time telling the difference between the real and the fictional. But until Trump himself writes his own presidential memoir, this one may have to do. And if, like Trump, you really don't care to read a book, Alec and Kurt have provided lots of very funny photos to look at. Now, to help the conversation move along this evening, the authors will be up here with my wife and business partner, Lissa, who's worked as a journalist and longtime speechwriter and advisor to Hillary Clinton, and most relevant most relevant for this evening, Lissa's an enthusiastic viewer of Saturday Night Live. So please join me in welcoming Alec, Kurt, and Lissa.
I think you're in the middle. Hi, everybody. How are you? Thank you all for coming out tonight. What a great crowd. We can actually see you, which is wonderful.
Can you see them? I can't see them at all.
I can see them. I see these hazy, round objects. Anyway, and it's going to be a really fun evening. We've been so thrilled thinking about this event. I want to thank you guys both for coming to the swamp. And Alec, back at where it started in politics for you, sort of. GW. He was a student here early on. And I just want to say that your timing is really impeccable because you've managed to come before Trump got back from his 12-day departure from the swamp.
All part of the plan.
All part of the plan. But if you're here at 10:45 tonight, you could just go 5 or 6 blocks over, maybe ring the doorbell, give him a free copy. Signed? You could sign it?
We thought about that.
You thought about it?
We thought about delivering him a copy.
But you decided not to.
We're in a hurry. We're busy.
Well, anyway, we're thrilled to have you here in D.C. We definitely need some levity, most 24 hours a day, basically. Anyway, I have to say that when I heard about this book, and I don't know if any of you out there felt this way, but I wasn't sure I was going to like it anticipatorily because the Trump comedy right now is so good on screen, on stage, and obviously you've developed it into an art of its own, a level of its own. It's really good, hard to beat. And obviously comedy on stage and screen is different from comedy on the paper in a book. And I'm just wondering, it was your idea to do the book, right, Alec?
Well, I said this in the press before. There was kind of a joke. I went to a sales conference for this other book. I wrote a memoir, and they said to me, "What are you going to write next?" And I just was kidding. I said, "Oh, I'm going to write a memoir, a Trump memoir, a parody memoir of Trump and his first 100 days in office or something." And they burst into applause. These like 20 people, and in this room that we're having this conference. And I said, I leaned over to my agent. I said, "We better get on this right away and try to get this sold." But I really mean this when I say this. I'm not being. He's heard me say this ad infinitum, and I'm not being kind or generous. And that is, when I did this, I knew I didn't have the time to write a book like this, and I didn't have the ability to write a book like this. I could think of really only one person who I thought was smart enough and talented enough as a writer in long form in a book.
And she wasn't available.
And she was not speaking to me. And by the way, Kurt's show is Studio 360, not Studio 36. Yeah, it's a great podcast. But I knew that Kurt was the only person who could do this, and I reached out to him, and he was available, and we got together, and he wrote the book. He wrote the book.
But you guys didn't really know each other.
Oh, I met him.
I got it. I gave him his start in radio. He guest hosted Studio 36 back when it was called that, in the 40s or 50s, and then no, truly, he did guest host the show, and we had known each other before that, and then we got to know each other better after he was a much better radio host than I, and became a radio host, a podcast host himself.
Although I did do your show, and your staff said to me, they go, "God, you're so good. You're so good. Would you come back and do the show again?" And I said, "Well, what would Kurt think about that?" And they said, "Kurt?"
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I did. I guested his show one time. But I've known who he is forever.
But we had never worked together, and that idea certainly appealed to me. That actually, and this seemed like a prime opportunity.
But it's interesting how someone like me is not going to get too heavy-handed and impose a lot of my mediocre writing on someone. And I knew when we made this unit here, he was going to do nearly all of the writing. I'd send him little notes and little paragraphs here and say, "Oh, try this," and he'd be like, "Yeah, thank you." But
you must have understood something about the Trump character that helped you with the
but
writing.
Well, there's little phrases and things, but the point is how do you get into that? How do you start?
Yeah.
With any book, what do you lock into? And that's what thrilled me when he would send me this stuff. And I don't want to ruin it for you, but I'll just mention one thing where he says that Trump, correct me if I'm wrong, but he says that Trump takes his iPhone and he dictates into the iPhone, and they've made an app where that stuff goes straight from my iPhone directly to the printer. There's nobody in between. There's no editor. So Trump is dictating this thing, and it's going right to the printer and going to the printing press, and that's the book directly to you, from me to you. And you're like, and I thought to myself, that's like the most brilliant thing I've ever heard in my life, What a great way to get into it.
Well, there was the Barron's editing app also.
Yes,
right?
well, Barron doesn't ever come on, the page. The president in this rendition refers to him a lot, and of course that can be tricky. One of Alec's Saturday Night Live colleagues got whacked for referring to Barron in an unkind way at one point. But he's there, and he becomes really again, this isn't really a spoiler, but he becomes a very important consultant to the president, really. And because, you know, who but an 11-year-old boy would give this guy the kind of advice he needs?
No, but I mean, actually, it's a serious point. I was going to ask you about it because back in the day of Saturday Night Live, the Chelsea Clinton sketch when she was, 12 or 13, got criticized roundly. And from there on, it was kind of hands-off of presidential kids, at least ones who weren't grown up like Don Jr. and Ivanka and Eric, whatever.
Then we really get that.
But then you could really turn the screws on. But the way Barron is in it a lot, but you have elevated him.
But in no way that
Totally
anybody
elevated.
can take exception to. I think.
No, absolutely. Elevated.
Yes, exactly.
And he's a
the
good
smartest
character.
person in the family.
So
You just see Trump out of people to come up against him, to offer him some devil's advocacy, to debate him or whatever. You just see him alone in his house at like 11 o'clock
Yes.
at night. There's Barron watching on his iPad or something, and Trump says something. I'm like, what do you think of this? And he reads him some notes, and the kid's like, sounds great, Dad. That's what he wants. So he just needs approval from wherever he's going to get it.
yeah.
And speaking to us doing it together, I mean, when Alec, he undersells his ability to do improvisational Trump language. The days we spent doing the photographs in this book, which was like shooting a little movie, really, and he was in the drag, that is to say the costume, I guess, he pretty much was Trump all day long. So that was a great pleasure. But really just the improvisational stuff was spot on. And again, as a collaborator in his additions, well, the yes and he could also say this, he could say this, were great because he speaks. We both speak Trumpese. It turns out we've learned the dialect.
We've learned how.
Do you improvise on the show?
No. When you go there, you'll say to them, I mean, working with writers, when you're not the writer, is the same pretty much wherever you go, which is that they are professionals at the highest level. He writes books, and he's a famous writer, and I work with the writers at SNL, and there are people who would prefer you give it a go as written, and we can get into the modifications later on after the dress or what have you. And if I say to them, I think this is repetitive of something we've already done before. I mean, they listen to me, but they, on occasion, they may take my advice, but they don't really need it. Chris Kelly and Sarah Schneider, who did most of the writing last year, who wrote most of the Trump stuff, were the two head writers. They left the show this year. Their contracts were up, and everything that they would give you was, pretty spot on in terms of the direction we were going to go in. But the other thing is that with the book is that the idea of him, how he develops. I don't want to give it away, but what happens to Trump during the book, something pretty predictable, but nonetheless thrilling, happens to Trump in the course of the book. And just mapping that out as to when he makes that turn. You go along, and right at the perfect time, boom, Trump starts to change somewhat. And I always say the same thing to people, which is that you may watch television comedy. SNL is just one example. You may watch on screens of whatever source this comedy zeitgeist about Trump. And many people don't feel that there's really anything there for them. They get that. I can just see people who, if I come on and I'm going like this and doing this goofy crap that I'm doing, they're going to go like click and change the channel. That shows you how old I am. Click and change the channel. What I meant was, boop, they changed the channel. And
Right there with you.
for everybody else who isn't quite sure, they want kind of a smarter or more detailed. This book is for them. This is really, really smart and
Well,
funny.
what's amazing about this book, and I was going to say I was worried about it, and then I read it. First of all, it is absolutely hilarious. It really is hilarious from start to finish. You kind of worry, are you going to have whatever it wouldn't be post-traumatic, I guess traumatic stress syndrome, just going through the last year again would be hard, but it wasn't. It's really, really funny. But what's amazing about it, and I guess this is the definition of really good parody, is that as outlandish as some of the things are, and there are many things that are outlandish, they're all believable, they're plausible. That's what's crazy. That's
Yeah.
what's terrifying.
Well, the challenge was, clearly from the beginning, was here is this guy who is like a fictional character, like a character in a movie, which of course is a fact that he uses to be entertaining, and that's what he's about. So, to parody that, to satirize that, you have to go further. But we didn't want to go over into the 3-minute cartoon version of him, or be too divorced from reality. To us, and I think that it's much more interesting, as you say, to have it be, wait a minute, am I really reading Donald Trump? If he were to speak his memoir into his iPhone, and have it be, plausible up to a point was the trick, but not have it be just as if, stuff we'd heard before, things he'd addressed before. So no, the challenge was clear. Doing it wasn't so easy, because writing is never easy.
But I think that the reason, we stop and think about where we're at in terms of the length of time that this has gone on. I was contacted about doing Saturday Night Live in the late summer. Lauren is a dear friend of mine, and we live near each other on Long Island, and I see him all the time in the summer. And he said to me, Tina had an idea that you would play Trump. I think I spit my drink out. I was like, Pfft. I said, I'm not going to play Trump. I've got that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't want to do that. And he said, no. We all thought 3 shows and out. A couple shows in October, rolling into November, and it would be over. And then, of course, it wasn't over, and we go on, and I never did I dream I would do that, but the response we had was kind of very dynamic and everything. But the reason this continues on into the next season, I'm the first person who wakes up. I wake up every day and go, okay, we're done now. We're enough of this. Like, all of you are sick of this, nobody. And then I walk out the door, and people are like, Alec! Fantastic, Alec. You're great, Alec. They don't stop in there. You're helping us get through. You're helping us get through. And I think that where I'm at, a year after the election, is that as I really thought this guy kind of crossed the line, even in the last couple of months, because I really expected him to change. I'm going to get a little serious here. I really expected he would change. I expected he would win, and he was completely unprepared. And he was a person that never worked, with others in a body like that. He was the mogul of a corporation and just, told everybody what to do. My idea about Trump is I don't think he's really gotten his hands dirty or been overly involved in anything over the last 20 years. I think that his team identifies some building they're going to tear down, or some bunch of buildings in Manhattan. If you live in New York, you know that New York has gone through another one of the great renaissance over the last 10 years, where they're ripping down 15 or 20% of the city. They are ripping down chunks of New York. You cannot believe what they're doing. And building big office buildings and building big apartment buildings. Everywhere you go, there's scaffolds and streets are closed, and it's a mess.
And taking the word Trump off buildings.
And taking the word Trump off the buildings.
Yeah.
And we're putting them on buildings here.
Right.
Yeah, well.
They are they really?
Well, there's one, anyway.
Right. But my point is, I'll finish this, but the thing is that I thought that he would get into this position, and several months would go by, and someone would be able to reach him. Someone would count, whether it was his daughter or who knows, who he listens to, and they'd say, listen, you won. Even though you won, and there's a lot of dispute about how you won and whether you're legitimate or not, for the time, getting the president out on like calling him out on a foul, like it's golf or something, is almost impossible to do. And I thought he would take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm the president now, and begin to focus on not only the power and the prestige and all of those kind of tactile or more common perks and benefits of being the president. The president of the United States, beyond anyone alive, more than anyone alive in the world, has a view of humanity that you could never get somewhere else. Mm-hmm. You travel around the world and you meet the best and brightest around the world. You see real human suffering and people who are trying to heal that suffering. You come home and you meet the creme de la creme of the arts, letters, academia, politics. All you do is shake hands and go to dinners and have photo ops with the greatest Americans alive, or the neediest Americans alive. And I thought to myself, my God, he would finally come to his senses and say, what a tremendous opportunity this is for me as a human being. Forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget it. And that alone, I thought to myself, we can't be mean enough to this guy.
Or give up.
He just doesn't get it.
Well, one of the
A tremendous gift that was given him, I should say, yeah.
And then at one point we have him talk about, if they say they want me to be presidential, but if I were presidential, they'd still hate me, and my people wouldn't like me as much. And I think that's something like that is actually probably going through his head. He knows it's that speech he gave a month or two into his presidency to the joint session of Congress. Everybody, tonight he became president. That was that night. And of course, the next morning he was no longer president because he was tweeting his madness. And I think that's not entertaining in the way he needs to be entertaining.
Well, Kurt, let me ask you, you are either very prescient or he's utterly predictable or both, because in this book there are things that you wrote as fiction. At the time they had not happened, that 3 weeks later they happened.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is also terrifying.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if you could comment about that, but then also looking ahead, if you were writing it now, what would you be writing as fiction that we might need to worry about?
Now, do you want to put your turban on, or you don't want to?
Yes, exactly.
Because you see
the Karnak thing we do.
you see in the future.
The first time it happened again and again, and he got tired of me just sending emails. Look, this thing from weeks ago, it just happened. One of them was early, a month before it happened. I wrote that he was thinking about firing Comey. They say I can't fire Comey. We'll see about that. Well, then he fired Comey, and then it happened in little ways. I mean, I guess that was, plausible, but it, was obviously shocked us all. There was, I had this idea of, he would be tense and anxious because he couldn't fire anybody, because he would discover that all the stewards and people at the White House were civil servants, and he couldn't just fire them like he can at Mar-a-Lago or his hotels. So I had Reince Priebus tell him, I found out that the head steward, the butler, this woman is at will, and you could fire her. And he gets excited and has Reince fire her. Well, a month later, she's fired. So it happened at the small level, the big level, and then at the 8th time it happened, Alex said, we're not ending this book with World War III, okay? We don't end this book with World War III, and we oblige. We don't. It ends in a dark place, but not that dark.
Have you both met him?
I met him a few times. You're in New York and you go to an event that's a social event, and something for the arts or something to raise money for a charity, and you'd see Trump would come, and he was all smiles and black tie and his wife in a gown, and they would come for the photo op and then leave. He was never I always have said that he's never a table mate at an event. You're going to the dinner afterward, and he was always absent from that. And people have pointed out to me that he's not tight with anybody in the real estate world itself. People in the real estate world, because unlike people think, that Wall Street doesn't really run New York. They almost do. They're a close second. But the real estate industry runs New York. And those men and some women who run that business and are on top of that business, some of them have said to me, he's not one of us. We never see him. We never hang out with him. We never really know him. When you met him, he was affable, but to me, I just think it's this notion, this is something that is very tired, maybe everybody's heard this before, but did you go and do this TV show, this reality show, and many people across the country, they bought this idea that he was this crack businessman, that he was this crack executive, this far-seeing, powerful, decisive, intimidating. They bought that DNA in him, where my friend said to me, and I was going to allude to this before, that he would drive up to one of these sites and his team would say, well, here's the ones we're going to tear down, and we're going to do project 69751. And he would pull up a limo and go, fantastic, sounds great. and then leave. You know, he was like, no, he's not a guy that's sitting there like Howard Rourke.
Yes.
He's standing over models of Megalopolis, and he's designing the new New York, you know.
Ayn Rand references. This is the kind of literary man I have here.
I'm just trying to keep up.
You know.
So you hadn't met him, but you had to kind of inhabit his mind. and you had to-
I've paid attention to him for too long of a time, yes.
Right, now,
I was a student of his, so to speak, and yeah, I did have to inhabit him, and of course I was paying attention to him back in the 80s and early 90s, and then didn't. I mean, I never watched Apprentice or Celebrity Apprentice, and as he was performing the role of a great executive. So then, and obviously like all of us, I have spent the last 2 years reading the interviews and hearing the interviews, but I spent some prep time, really a couple, 3 weeks, just immersed 15 hours a day in all of the material, especially the unedited raw transcripts of his interviews with the Washington Post and the New York Times, which give you a sense of the way his mind works in a way that edited bits of it never do. The zigzagging and the compulsive self-praise and all of it. And in fact, I worried a little bit that in this book, he's a little too, his sentences end properly, and they are decipherable, and they're you can't do a full reproduction of how he speaks, or it wouldn't be intelligible.
but what is
We cleaned him up. We cleaned him up a little bit.
We did.
But what is amazing about it, I think one of the more subtle things that's still very powerful about it is the digressions. Like you'll be going along and then there's just this crazy digression that just seems like exactly the way he would digress. So you're just kind of imagining that mostly?
Yeah, no, and I did. I mean, fortunately, we had to do it very quickly, and it was from beginning to the end. Manuscript was 3 months, and then we were able to update it all summer long. But I was glad it lasted. It was as brief a period as it was, because I was kind of inhabiting him a bit, and my wife insists that I became a nasty jerk for 2 or 3 months. Not so much to her, but about other people, that I would just say the rudest things about people. So I guess I felt his pain, I guess, as one of his predecessors might have said.
Does that mean you empathize? You have to
No.
empathize?
Well, I mean, it is writing fiction, even though he's a real guy. It's a novel, and empathize. Get a sense of understanding, a more visceral sense of understanding of him than I did just when I was a more casual reader and observer.
You write beautifully about his relationship with his mom. Very, very tender and very beautiful. Yeah. She had zero influence on him, but it was a beautiful relationship.
Alec, what about, obviously there's a difference between impersonating a real person and acting, and developing a character, creating a character who's not real. And you've always done, you were a kid you like impersonating.
Right, sometimes, yeah.
So how hard was it to do Trump?
It was very hard because, what we have him do on the TV show was almost always at a podium at some public forum, a debate. You're talking to a crowd, you're talking to a TV camera. It's public Trump. And I would say to them, oh, please write something that's a little more intimate so I could at least attempt to display a more finely honed Trump of mine. I've been working on it now, trying to get it all finely cut. And, it's almost always him in front of a bunch of coal miners. We're gonna have so much coal. All your children will be working in coal forever. And the crazy stuff in that 5-minute cold opening. Then this last time we did it, not last week, but a couple weeks ago, we were in the shower trying to make sure that Manafort wasn't wearing a wire.
Yeah.
I like that. That was great.
Well, and you had your brilliant colleague, your compatriot, Kate McKinnon.
Kate McKinnon, everybody.
She'll have more material to work with after today.
Say again?
She'll have more material to work with after today.
Yes. But I mean, I think it's, no, she's incredible. And so whenever they write something and we can kind of mix it up a little bit. But, you know, the thing with Trump, again, is that, like this past week, we said, you know something, we'll take a couple weeks off and let it build up a little bit so that people will appreciate it more. And then I'm going to go back in December and do a couple shows. But every week, with some exceptions, very few exceptions, as I've said before, Trump is the head writer of SNL. He just comes up with this shit every week. And there we are.
Yeah.
And
No, and to the point of inhabiting him, and I think this book does give as three-dimensional of a depiction of how his mind works as I'm proud of it in that way. I think it's fun and it's entertaining and it makes those of us who aren't his base feel a community of pleasure about it. But I think it does in a way that journalism can't.
Right.
Give a kind of sense of like, yeah, this is probably what this guy.
But I think he's trying to be coy, and I'll say this, and that is, you put a different cover on this book and you read this book, and there's huge swatches of what you sit there and think, this is Trump's book, this is Trump's memoir.
Oh.
This is how Trump talks and thinks. I mean, it's very close to, we don't have to go detour very far from him to send him up. We just, regurgitate much of what he thinks and says.
Yeah, he's 10, and this is turned up to 11.
Well, part of that is because it's not that we believe what he says, but we can believe he said it. So,
Right.
So
And
he
thinks
says,
it.
I'm probably giving a little bit too much away here, but throughout the book, his golf scores improve.
To an insane, and degree, yes. Right.
Superhuman, of course, which he says he is, level of 18 holes in one outing or something.
Yeah.
So we know he could never do that, but we certainly believe he would say that. So that's, I think, what makes it so plausible in a terrifying way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What about getting ready to play him?
Well, now we go there and do the show. We do a dress. I mean, for people who know SNL, we do we talk about the sketch during the week, and then, of course, things evolve with Trump, and by Thursday, sketches are out the window and a new sketch comes in. And but come Friday night in the early evening, we rehearse for a little while in camera block, and between maybe like 7 and 9 or 7 and 10. And then Saturday, we're there all afternoon rewriting and camera blocking and rehearsing. And then we do a full dress at 8 o'clock in front of a live audience, which is a longer show. That's a 2-hour show so that Lorne can have 11 sketches to look at and see which ones performed best in front of the audience, and then choose the 8 sketches that'll be on the air, along with commercials and updates. So there's a full dress in front of an audience that is whittled down to the 90-minute show at 11:30. And we do that, and to me, it's just, if I do go with it a little bit and really push myself a little bit, it's easier because you want all that to be automatic and you don't have to think about it. You have to, I don't want to do it now, but it's like, just sticking your mouth out as far as you can and just shoving your jaw out as far as you can and arching your eyebrow and finding what line to rip it on, where you're like, I realize that the American people just aren't ready for somebody who's as fantastic as I am. You kind of rip and take off on one line, he has like these emotional farts that come flying out of him, of self-love, But we try to, I've done this thing which is a huge caricature, and I know that, and but I think people kind of needed that. I didn't do this by design. I think people kind of needed that because he's so, everybody says the same thing, he's so beyond parody himself. He parodies himself that in order for us to get there, we have to find a special place for all of it, the sound of it and the look of it and everything.
And, as Alec said, Alec insisted on describing himself as America's foremost mediocre Trump impersonator. I mean, as he says himself, there are people who spend all their time doing this precise version. The fact that it is Alec Baldwin and it is Saturday Night Live, and the sheer glee and brilliance with which he does this, it makes it, it is the Trump.
I'd like to stop doing it, by the way.
It is the Trump for the ages.
I want him to go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we can all.
He was worried he'd be gone by now when we started doing this.
Yeah. Well, we went to this thing. I went to the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial. They have their dinner called Ripple of Hope. And they had it last year, right after the election. I mean, Kerry Kennedy and Ethel and all of the members of Ethel's family who come out, generations of them. There's 3-4 generations of them there, many Kennedys there, to raise money for the Human Rights Center for the late Robert Kennedy. And I go to that, and one of the honorees was Biden. And Biden was the outgoing vice president, and he received one of these awards, and he got up there, and behind him is a lot of imagery, large panels and imagery of Kennedy and some of his peers at that time. And like anybody, you go with that, and you really sit in that for a little while, and you just get very emotional, about what we had then, or the potential for what we had then and what we have now, and so forth. And but Biden said the greatest thing. Biden said, you think this is bad, this guy winning this election? He said, you think this is bad? He says, our country's going to survive this. He said, 1968 was bad. He said, that was a bad year. King is killed, Kennedy's killed, the Chicago Convention. Nixon pulls the stake out of his heart, gets out of the coffin, and becomes president of the United States. I mean, and you just realize that, 68, that was a bad year, and we survived that. And I keep telling myself, we will survive this, but just to undo the damage two departments alone, to undo the damage, the psychic damage done by Pruitt and DeVos alone is going to take years to clean up that mess. So.
Yeah. Well, part of what you're doing is helping with the psychic damage. For those of us who feel like we're all in the midst of some horrible collective national trauma, right? Comedy is a relief. It's solace, it's comfort, it's there, whatever you want to call it. And I suspect that the fact that you have so gotten under his skin brings joy to tens of millions of people who otherwise would be in terrible despair.
Well, he still sends once a year a desperately pathetic letter to my former partner at SPY, Graydon Carter, saying, look, here's a picture of my hands. My fingers aren't small. And Graydon replies saying, yes, they are, and sends them back. So no, he's not joking around. He is among other things, extraordinarily thin-skinned. And now that he's back in the United States, perhaps he can see this book, and we can have a whole new chapter of thin-skinned pleasure.
Right. And I hope, as I was told, I cannot reveal my source, but as I was told, that his wife loves Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And apparently she watches it and laughs and thinks it's the funniest thing in the world. And I really hope I can get a copy of this in her hands. I'd like to figure out how I can do that. She'll love this, too.
It's only 6 blocks away, I'm telling you.
Not too far
right
away.
after the show. You couldn't have a book by Trump, a memoir about Trump's first year without Trump talking about you. So there is, can I read this, or do you want to read this?
What page is it on?
It's right here, page 219. Here, I've got it for you.
I've got it right here.
Under the star, where the little star thing is.
I know which one it is. He says, this is one of my... No, he's funny. He's really funny. Best thing about the summer was no SNL, which is a show that I made successful after it was completely failing. It should have been canceled 25 years ago, but wasn't because Lorne Michaels, who's a Canadian immigrant, maybe legal, maybe not. So ungrateful, must have terrible dirt on the executives at RCA and General Electric and Comcast. And I have a great sense of humor, but the hater Alec phone message Baldwin is so bad at playing me, like he's doing Aldo Ray or somebody. He and his brothers were like the Bowery Boys of Long Island, famous losers. All big mouths and no balls, although the young one, Stephen, is good people. Before he went born again, I'm told he was like the David Bowie of Massapequa, grade A perverts. Although that's true of many of the born-agains before they become born again.
And by the way, that hilarious paragraph, almost entirely written by Alexander
One
Baldwin.
paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of 6.
And the lawyers were happy when I told them that it was him shitting on his brother, not me.
Right.
That somehow made it better.
So many of you had questions, so we'll take some of the audience questions now, and some of them overlap, so I'll try to consolidate those that did. We touched on this, but maybe this is a better put than I put it to you. What do you see as the greater purpose of parody in politics? Is it a form of protest, escape, or purely entertainment?
Well, I think all of those things, parody, satire, done well, are I think they're useful. I don't think they are useful in the sense that politics itself is useful. Maybe Tina Fey's version of Sarah Palin, helped lose the election for John McCain. I doubt it. I think I think it is a way to see more clearly about certain characters and people. I think it is a form, to me, a wonderful and necessary form of preaching to the choir, because the choir needs preaching to not be miserable about what they see happening in the world. So I think it is, I wouldn't say therapeutic even, although it's that as well. We all have our means and our ways of reflecting and responding to these extraordinary situations, and political satire has not been really a thing. I've done humor and satire in various ways, but until this, that really wasn't one of my specialités. And I know, I think it's, we feel, here's a bunch of people who have felt better about this guy and this situation because of Alec's amazing performance of him, and we want to share in some version of resistance that isn't, grim-faced, and that has a sense of glee and human happiness about it.
But where Tina did Palin so well, and it had an effect on the election, I think is a part of the kind of sexist culture we live in now, where she plays her as this kind of blithe dolt of a woman, and that had an effect on the election. You could disagree with McCain's policies on a lot of things, but McCain is a real person who's had a real career, and he was a war hero and so forth. And I was kind of stunned that McCain lost myself, because I thought he was everything that Americans were going to want to rally around. And but where Tina did that, and they had that effect on Palin, and we did not have that effect on Trump. Men in this society tend to be given, until recently, maybe this is going to change, that men seem to be given a pass when he says these vulgar things, and many people have pushed this now, that they want to get they don't want to just get sexual predators, they want to get the sexual predator as far as they're concerned. He's the big trophy that they want to bag. And I certainly support that idea where he's guilty of those things. But I think it was sad that with all that, I mean, there were so many women in this country they would interview who would sit there and be like, that's men. Men say stupid things. Men say awful things about women from time to time. They don't really think that way. They say it every now and then. That doesn't mean that's who they are. It doesn't define them. Men are capable of saying very sexist things about women. And so many women gave him a pass for that. And I found that absolutely just mortifying, really, that Trump did well with women. I thought that was just unthinkable. But no. And but I think the other thing is that we need to do whatever we can to keep our wits about us, because this is a very, very dangerous time for the country. I mean, you've got people that are, under the Goldwater law, that they're not allowed to offer their opinions of psychiatrists, and people who are mental health professionals are not allowed to offer their opinions and analysis and of people without examining them. And yet you still have this woman, I saw her on Twitter, and I come onto this site with this Asian American woman who's from the Yale School of Psychiatry. I forget who she was, I have to find it. She's saying how, according to the tenets of their field, you can bypass that gold border rule if you really think that there's danger involved for someone. I can go ahead and say, I'm going to say that person is mentally unfit because they are clearly exhibiting that they're a danger to themselves or someone else. If someone's hanging, if Michael Jackson's hanging his kid off the balcony of the Parisian hotel, we don't need to, go to have a conference next door to realize that that's a stupid thing to do, And I think that we need to keep a light on him every minute of the day, all day long.
In every kind of way.
In every way, yeah.
Well, there's a sad question that is, I guess, sort of related to what you're saying, and it's, do either or both of you have advice for those of us in the audience who must serve/work for this administration? Any words of wisdom or encouragement would be appreciated from a civil servant hailing from deep inside the swamp. And it's a serious question. I mean, if you look at the evisceration of the State Department and the political pressure at the EPA and now the Justice Department.
What's that person's name, by the way?
I don't know. Civil servant. Yeah, exactly. No longer a civil servant. But it's a serious question.
I don't envy such a person, but I mean, we're all in this together. I mean, this person is miserable in her or his own way, perhaps made more miserable about a job she or he probably loves. I think for someone like this, reading a funny book that gives you a sense of what this guy is like, and if he were ever to read it himself, would either think
civil servants.
Yes, exactly. I don't know what to tell them.
But I think that if people have I tend to think of this very simply, and that is you've got a family. If you're a woman and you're married to a man and have kids, you're married to another woman and have kids. If you have a spouse and a family or whatever your situation is, you have an obligation to try to hold on to your job. No one's going to fault you for that. No one's going to fault you for having a job in the
unless you're Kellyanne Conway or something.
Kellyanne Conway. But even in the permanent force of workers here, and then these administrations come and go, we can't really fault you for that. But I just, I think that all the more reason I want us to see change come, because I think a lot of people are, this isn't America. This isn't America. People, whenever I go places, people always have dual impressions of Americans. Americans are, jelly donut eating, latte sipping, SUV driving. They've got every health problem in the world. And then I turn around and I go, then there's another bunch of Americans I know who are up at 4:30 in the morning, running around the reservoir in Central Park. They're going to the gym. They work 12 hours a day. I mean, in my mind, the preponderance of people in this country are among the hardest working people I've ever met. Americans work hard. Americans are hard workers. And whether you got a white-collar job or a blue-collar job, they're hard workers. And I just thought we'd love to have a president who was more like us,
I mean, you guys both, obviously you're disturbed by Trump, as many, many, many of us are. Alec, you came here to study political science. You were going to be a lawyer, I think, and then you went off into acting, but sort of maybe you've come full circle. You're very involved politically. You care a lot about politics. Obviously, you do, too. What was the foundation for your political energy, would you say?
Let's hear about you. Tell them all about you. Where are you from? Where you went to school?
Okay. Well, long ago, in a small house in Omaha, Nebraska, I grew up in a house of sane conservative Republicans, which were a numerous class of people back in the 60s when I was growing up. And they weren't conspiracists, and they, as far as I know, didn't approve of pedophiles running for the U.S. Senate. And if climate change were on the table, they would have probably believed that it was real. They were great Republicans. And at one point, at age 13, I had a giant poster of Richard Nixon on my wall. And then 3 years later, I was the Nebraska state coordinator for George McGovern. So that's, you know, that was the time. And so no, I went to college like Alec a little bit, thinking some kind of politics thing, maybe writing. But then then I got on the Harvard Lampoon, and my life was ruined for politics, and I just became among other things, a humorous writer. But so no, I mean politics. I've written about politics. I got a job at Time Magazine where I got to write about politics, and so I've cared about it. But and I have my feelings as a citizen. But politics has not really until the last year, 2 years, been as central to my life as it feels right now.
Seems like the 60s were a crucible for you both, and certainly for me and my age group. And maybe the way Trump will be a crucible for however many of you out there
That's
are in
one
that.
silver lining, is that he'll galvanize people's political passions, I think. You know, I mean, I remember when I was living in my apartment building on the Upper West Side, and Barack Obama came into the building with a small contingent of people to go to some guy's house who I know who's a big Democratic fundraiser. This is during the primaries. And he walked in and he nodded to me. He said, Mr. Baldwin, and I said, Senator Obama, and I knew who he was. And I was shocked that he knew who I was, and I nodded, and he walked into the lobby, and I thought, under my breath, I thought, good luck, pal.
Yeah.
I said, she's going to dribble you up and down Pennsylvania Avenue. She's going to kick your ass, you know? Because I was very enamored of the Clintons. I knew the Clintons tangentially, and Bill Clinton was somebody who, whenever I was around him, he would stop, he'd put his hand on my shoulder, and he'd give me like a 10-minute lecture, like we were at the Kennedy Center School, the Kennedy School of Government. He'd share something with me. He knew I wanted to not have small talk. He'd sit there and say, let me tell you what's going on in Korea, what you really need to know about Korea. He'd say, Korea is really, what's going on in Korea is really not what you read. And he'd just tell me something about, he'd give me like some factoids. He'd give me a little basket, like someone would give me some soaps and some bath salts. He'd give me a little bundle. He made a beautiful little basket of ideas about politics. I see him at the Elton John AIDS Foundation thing with my wife just now. And he puts his hand on my shoulder. He goes, let me tell you something. If the Democratic Party believes that this is going to be resolved, that we're going to get everything back by impeaching this guy, they're wrong. We got to dig down and get back to who we are and commit ourselves to what we stand for. And an impeachment isn't going to solve this. He starts lecturing me about what the Democrats have to do. And no, I mean, it's thrilling, believe me. And when Obama won the first time, I was kind of engaged in certain races, local races where I live on Long Island and some in the city. I did a little campaigning for de Blasio. And then when Obama had his second term, right after that, I met my wife, and she's pregnant for our first child. I got remarried, and my wife proceeded to have 3 children in 3 years and 3 months. We had 3 children in a row. And I kind of checked out of everything.
Irish triplets.
Yeah, right. Irish triplets. I just checked out. I mean, like people would say to me, Obama this and this and this Supreme Court decision. I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm chasing my kid around the house all day. So I checked out of that, which was uncharacteristic for me. And now I find, with where we are now, is I'm kind of recommitted to finding some way to encourage people to participate more. I ran into a woman on the street, a young woman. I went to an event. I went to go meet a political consultant who's going to help me write a speech I have to give in front of an organization. It's a big, big gathering out in Iowa. And I went to his office, and I came out. There's 3 young people in the lobby, one guy and a woman, and a young African-American woman who was just this absolutely one of the most charismatic people I've ever met in my life. And I said, you're here studying politics. She was with some think tank. They have an internship. And I said, are you going to run for office? And she said, well, I would like to. I think I would like to. I'm not quite sure, but I think maybe I have that in me. I said, you must run for office. We need more people to run. Because what's the problem with politics in this country is these people all have stickers on them like they're NASCAR drivers. They're all owned and bought and sold by somebody. And we need to open the windows and open the doors and get some fresh air in there. Have some new faces in American politics.
I mean, just the last election in Virginia and elsewhere, there were so much new
North.
blood. Right?
New Jersey.
New Jersey, Virginia, Helene, Montana, a lot of new faces.
There's great news
came
about
in.
Northam.
Yeah.
Tell them where you're speaking in Iowa, here in Washington. Alec?
You know, this will start rumors going to Iowa. You
I'm
just
going
have to go to
the,
New Hampshire after that.
the Iowa Democratic Committee has their Jefferson Jackson dinner November 27th, and I'm the keynote speaker there. Yeah. I'm the keynote speaker.
You got to be careful. You'll be in New Hampshire the
Let me
week
tell
after.
you something about Iowa. No, it's not.
Well, okay, so you obviously can impersonate Clinton. So what is your favorite impersonation? Who is your favorite person to impersonate?
Probably my children, probably my son. I'm one of those people, I'm so in love with my kids, it's really pathetic. I'm as love my little kids.
My great perk of doing this with him is getting to hear him do both obscure 1940s actors that I'd say, yeah, that's perfect, pretending I know who he's doing. But also, for instance, we spent an entire lunch together. I just kept insisting that he keep doing Marlon Brando because he spent time with Brando, and it's
But my son is he always says to me now, he's like, no work, Dada, no work. He says work, no work. Don't go to work, Dada. So I'm obsessed with my kids. I've got 3 little kids, and my wife are having another one. My wife is giving me next April. I'll turn 60. And for my 60th birthday, my wife is giving me another baby. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
We're going to have a baby when I'm 60.
60 years young, so it's okay. Okay, so here's one.
Well, as I said before, I can't resist this joke. My friend said to me, you know, you'll have 3 sons. I have a daughter and I'll have 3 sons because we're having a boy. And my friend said to me, who's similar in age and on a similar path, he said, remember one thing, by the time your sons are old enough to sneak out of the house and do things you don't approve of, you'll be deaf anyway, so it won't even bother you. There is that.
Okay, so there were several about getting ready for the show, and so this kind of sums it up. How long does the makeup take, and how do they make svelte you look fat?
Well, I wear these well, I haven't always been svelte in the last few years, but I've been trying. Now, when you see me get up and this is over, I injured my leg, so I'm moving a little poorly. But we put the fat pants on, and I guess maybe they wanted me to pad my upper body, but getting in and out of that was tricky with the clothes. So I don't think we really worry. Well, I told them once I wanted to kind of underline that, and I wanted them to get a guy that was who, I don't want to say obese, but I wanted to get an actor, a double, and I wanted me to come, like you're the camera, and I would walk up toward a shower, and then I'd start to take my robe off and step into the shower, and then there'd be a wall, and I'd stop, you wouldn't see this, and another guy would step in for the silhouette, and he'd be this really, like, garlic bulb-shaped man, you know? I begged them to do that.
You begged me to do this in this book.
I begged you, yes, I begged you too. Yeah. I'm obsessed with having Trump in the shower.
Okay. All right, well, you're talking about kids, so this is from Adam Stern and Arlo Nemerson, grade 9. Can you give us an executive order canceling our homework assignment that is due tomorrow? Might be pushing it, guys, I don't know. And then there were a couple about 30 Rock. One is, how did your work on 30 Rock help shape your ability to portray the President of the United States today?
Wow.
And the other was, do you think Jack would have voted for Trump?
Everybody says that, yeah. Everybody says that. I think that, 30 Rock really was the greatest experience of my life. I'll never have a better job. I'll never work with better people. That was the most fun I've ever had. You know, when the show goes along, all actors complain either way. When they don't have a job, they want to go to work, and then when they go to work, they're like, when are we getting out of here? I want to go to dinner with my friends. And all they whine about is their condition. And when I did the show, after like 3 or 4 seasons, we got to season 5, and as is the case with several of those types of shows, they hit a bit of a patch, and the writing was a bit weaker after they won the Emmy, 3 years in a row or whatever it was. And things were really good season 2, 3, 4. Season 5 comes and it was not great. And I said to myself, I was signed for 6. I said, I'm going to do next year, and I'm out of here. This is over. We're done. I've got other things to do. And I was appreciative, but I was pretty final. I'm out of here. Then we come to season 6, and it's a renaissance. Everything's funny as hell again. And I go, sign me up for 7, 8, and 9 right now. I'm going to stay here for a while. But by then, Tina had 2 kids, and I think she was really wiped out because she was exec producing, and she created the show, and she was the head writer, and she was acting. And she really worked very hard. It was amazing to watch. But people have come to us in that kind of Will and Grace reboot, and these shows that are being redone. If we would redo the show, we would reboot the show. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to doubt it, but I think I definitely thought if they did a spin-off about my character, I thought he would probably have to have, a constant interfacing with the Trump administration, yeah. A lot of those one-sided phone calls where I'm like, Donald, we wouldn't hear the other end of the phone call.
But he would be Donaghy would be a kind of guy that Trump would use as his
Donaghy
kitchen
would
cabinet.
be in the kitchen cabinet, yeah. He would be.
But he'd vote for him.
I think that he didn't. I think he didn't throw the lever for either one. You know what I mean? Because God knows he would never vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite things was when Rip Torn played my boss, Don Geiss. And he told me I was anointed to be the head of the company. And then he has a coma. And he goes into a coma. And he has no chance to tell everyone else at GE that I'm the anointed one. Yeah. And he's in a coma. And he's laying there. I'm trying to revive him from the coma. And I'm standing over Rip Torn. I'm going, sir, Hillary Clinton is president, sir. Let's just see if he spasms in some way or he can hear me. And, no, Hillary Clinton was just, that would have been a nightmare for Donaghy, I think.
He's like, to my mind, Alec loves Donaghy too much. I think Donaghy is like a younger, smarter, more focused Donald Trump in a lot of ways, actually.
I'm devastated to hear you say that. I don't want to play him anymore now. You've ruined it.
But it is interesting that you sort of migrate to these characters.
Well, you know what the difference is? That it's a profound difference to me. I mean, none of this matters for the purposes of this conversation, but in terms of acting and all that other kind of crap, is that when we did the TV show, Donaghy wanted to have a good time. Donaghy wanted to, he wanted to go on boats, and he wanted to go on yachts, and he wanted to have young women he was dating, and he wanted to have nice restaurants. And there's that wonderful moment where we did this thing that Tina and I kind of, not invented, but we pushed this idea. We would be staring out over the balcony of Rockefeller Plaza, off into the ether, and the camera would be shooting us and into the building from the terrace. And I'd look out the window, I have a glass of wine in my hand, and she had a glass of wine in her hand. It's nighttime, and Tina would say, God, work, and everything is work, and all I do is work, and she's lamenting all that. And she goes, pretty soon, no one's gonna want to see me naked, she'd say. And I don't even look at her, I have a glass of wine, and I go, well, you make enough money, you pay someone to see you naked. I was like, Donaghy, when you let anything stand in his way, we're gonna have a good time. Whereas with Trump, it's the opposite. Trump never has a good time. That's why we play him. The whole root of it with SNL is to make him as miserable as possible.
Right. I mean, I was interested in that because that came out in something that you guys have written or talked about somewhere. That really the essence of him, we always think of him as a bully and a narcissist and egomaniac and all, which he is, racist, homophobe, whatever. But he's really miserable. That's and you said self-loathing.
Insecure and unhappy. And I think that my view is that just seeing him from afar, watching him from afar 30 years, that wasn't always, to me, that's the difference. Back in the 80s and 90s, he seemed to kind of be having a good time.
He was jauntier, yeah.
Yeah, he just, to me, he's reached a point where he's never happy and realizes now that he's got this biggest brass ring of all, because the other thing I always thought about him is I've never known of anybody who has such a voracious need for attention as he does. Now he won the prize. He's got more attention than any human, maybe in human history. And he's still miserably unhappy. And so, I think his misery is probably more pronounced today than it has ever been.
Well, we're close to running out of time. I want to just ask one thing and then end with one other question from the audience. But obviously, this collaboration worked very well because you're sitting here together and you had fun, I think, working on it. So, another collaboration.
We have some ideas. We're not going to.
I was actually
sneeze it out there into the ether now. We got a couple of cards up our
but it's in the realm of possibility. Okay,
yes.
good. Well, people can.
Andersen and Baldwin have a future. Let's just put it
Okay. Excellent. Good to hear. Okay, last question.
He does all the writing, and I get all the laughs and
See?
do the stupid
The perfect
shtick.
partnership. Okay, so here's the last question. Baldwin Fay 2020?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I went to school here, and I went to school here, and I went to my dorm my freshman year, 1976, when I went to school here. And I was in Thurston. I was in the zoo. I was in Thurston, and I walk in my room. I'm in a 6-man suite, and the other 3 other guys are there. I'm like, "Where are you from, Jeff?" He's like, "I'm from Cherry Hill, New Jersey." I said, "What are you here to study?" "I'm going to study politics." "I'm going to be the president of the United States." And I was like, "Oh, really? And where are you from, Tom?" "I'm from Worcester, Mass," he'd say. "And I'm here to study political science, and I'm going to be the president of the United States." Everybody came here to get into politics, or they were very, very pumped about American politics back then. When I went to school here, they had disbanded the George Washington University Student Association during the demonstrations in the 70s. And in the fall of 76, or the spring of 76, in the preceding year, before I got here, they had reconstituted the government and elected this guy, Joe LaMagna, who was, I can't believe I remember this, but Joe LaMagna, who was the first renewed president of the renewed Student Association. Back then, I had 2 roommates my sophomore year who were Iranian, and their families lived in Tehran. And they would burn the Shah in effigy in Lafayette Park. And you'd have people protesting, screaming at the top of their lungs, "Down with the Shah! Shah is fascist butcher!" Down. Protesting. The students would confide in me that the Savak had members of the secret police hidden in the classrooms to monitor them, to watch them, so they didn't get too political. And then the Shah is overthrown, and my roommate comes back to school the following year, and he who would be crying, he'd be in tears and say, "I no can speak of Shah. I no can speak of Shah. My family is in Tehran. I no can speak of Shah." The following year, he's like, "Shah is fascist butcher," he's screaming, so happy. That was a different Washington. That was when they had Bon Appetit. If any of you remember Bon Appetit, God bless you. And then GW went and bought every, dry cleaner, Chinese laundry, hoagie shop, liquor store. They bought everything, ripped it down, built up the big GW real estate portfolio. When I went to school here, it was a different Washington. I'll give you one last example. When I went to school here, I used to go out to Herndon or Reston to get pumpkins to carve for Halloween. There were no houses out there. There were no houses there. Herndon and Reston were farms. As far as the eye could see, you go buy vegetables there and bring them back at the town, and we'd all make dinner somewhere. So I went here, it was a very different school. But in that time, I've moved on and had a different career, and got married again. I'm love my wife more than anything, and we have 3 little kids and another one coming. To run for office is something that I want to do, but it doesn't seem really practical with my lifestyle now with my children. And number 2, I'm not quite sure that Trump has left it open for non-traditional candidates to move. But really, I mean, is the pendulum going to swing the other way, and people are going to want people with real bona fide credentials as the head of a state house, a governor, or whatever? I don't know if people post-Trump will want someone again who's never held elective office. I mean, I care. Do I think I'd be a good president? Yeah, I think I'd be a good president. But I really think I would. But because number one, I'd enjoy it. I wouldn't be in the back get me a chocolate cake from the hotel. I'm so depressed. That wouldn't be me at all. I would enjoy that window on the world, and try to get things done. But we're going
to have a new mayor of New York starting in 2021. So maybe,
Well, listen.
I just know that I'm not quite sure what the result of Trump will be electoral politics-wise.
Yeah.
Well, we have elected a comedian to the Senate.
Yeah.
Who is a very good senator.
He went to Harvard.
Anyway, we have to end this, unfortunately, now, but I want to say thank you
Thank you all very much.
This is a public service.
Thank you.
It's a great public service. Thank you all so much.